Oh, what a day it was to be a bear in the 2008 life simulation game, Spore. The sun was shining, there was plenty of food, and bear society was progressing at an incredible rate under the guidance of First Prime Minister Barnaby Bear. Having made their way to the top of the animal kingdom, the bears had gained substantial brain power. They now read books, played Monopoly, and one bear even held the speedrun world record for the Mario Kart course Maple Treeway. So the bears began to build their very first settlement. They called it Barcelona. But to establish a proper tribe would be a difficult task, and because of this, it was to Barnaby Bear's great pleasure that he found they were surrounded on all sides by an almost infinite amount of salmons. If a bear created a restaurant, the menu would probably go as follows. Number 1, honey. Number 2, marmalade. Number 3, picnics. And number 4, salmons. It was no surprise then when Barnaby ordered the tribe to terrorise, burn, pillage and eat every single salmon in sight. Some villagers they smoked, others they seasoned. Each batch of salmon was even more delicious than the previous. But not everything was plain sailing, and there were a few minor inconveniences along the way. The most notable was the appearance of a giant whelk. You might be thinking, well, just eat the whelk and be done with it. But come on, even bears have standards. Whelks are tough and chewy and taste of feet. On top of this, they are incredibly strong, and also incredibly evil. I heard that they enjoy stealing old women's purses and making babies cry. The bears tried their best to take the giant whelk down, but it was far too powerful. And, severely wounded, Barnaby and his crew had to take a short fishing break to recover. Meanwhile, the tenacious salmon had mustered the strength to fight back. Taking the initiative, they confronted the bears head on, and the battle was closer than you might think. But Mother Nature is a cruel mistress, and the food chain doesn't lie. The bears did not lose, and they continued their conquest, this time with 2 healers, just in case they ran into that whelk again. And by the time they were done wiping out the entire salmon population, a grand new scheme was afoot. Having become accustomed to the delicious taste of high-quality salmon, Barnaby and the other bears craved something more. They built themselves a cabin as a headquarters and began to brainstorm. One of the bears suggested maybe trying out a bit of nuclear warfare, but this was a terrible idea, not least because with their big bear claws, they might accidentally press dangerous red buttons. The next bear suggested maybe making tanks, but that seemed overly aggressive as well. The final suggestion was a bit more suitable. What if the bears could bake some fish pies? Thought everyone. Having wiped out the salmon entirely, it was probably going to be difficult to find any ingredients. The bears would need to find a whole new food source. And then, it hit them. Why were they still focusing on fish? Fish were a thing of the past. What was a bear's number 1 favourite food? That's right, honey. It was decided. Barnaby Bear would become the owner of the world's biggest honey supply. No, he would go even further. He would gather all of the honey in the whole planet. With their mission decided, the bears built a city called Birmingham. Jesus Christ. And then worked on engineering some vehicles in the shape of jars so they could scoop up honey wherever they went. By the time they were done, the bear population was beginning to get impatient. But, luckily for them, they didn't have to look far to find exactly what they were searching for, as just outside the city walls was their first honey geyser. To the untrained eye, the substance coming out of this geyser might not look like honey, but this is in fact honey in gas form. And you're gonna have to trust me on that, because in real life, honey gas isn't a thing. The bears converted the geyser into a honey factory, and began to harvest its golden elixir. But this was only the beginning. And, taking a look at the map, the bears realised just how many honey hotspots this world had. Without further ado, a new fleet of honeypot vehicles set out in all directions to scoop up some more of those honey geysers. And as they did so, the bear empire continued to expand. But just as everything was going smoothly, Barnaby noticed something strange. The honeypot cars he had sent out had not yet returned home. What's more, one by one, they disappeared from his radio comms. Maybe something about being full up with honey was interfering with the car's Wi-Fi signal, he thought. The bears built even more honeypots and sent them out to investigate. But on their way to the site of the disappearances, they discovered something truly terrifying. Towering above them was a giant salmon. With little time to think, the bears had to sneak past by taking a secret route through the mountains. But with its super salmon sensors, this giant salmon was clever, and it managed to intercept them at the end of the pass. The bears wheeled round, ready to go on the offensive. Even a giant salmon was still just a salmon after all. But then... a salmon that could breathe fire? Now this was a problem. If they couldn't pass through the mountains, how would they ever take advantage of all of the wonderful honey on the other side? And then, as if to answer their call, the Green Nation of Bears set up a city nearby. This was a blessing and a curse. Although Barnaby Bear now had competition for his honey empire, the Green Nation seemed peaceful. And, more than that, they provided the giant salmon with a great distraction. Its head was turned by the arrival of some new green vehicles, and while its attention was drawn, the honeypots were able to gather up all the geysers in the surrounding area. The people of Birmingham celebrated this small victory, but their fireworks were premature. And, on the way home, yet another brave crew of bears were caught by the fire-breathing giant salmon. This had gone too far. The bears couldn't continue to tiptoe around this ferocious beast, or it would be the end of them. Barnaby Bear knew the situation called for drastic action, and thus commenced Operation Bear Brotherhood. Searching once again on the map, Barnaby saw that the Green Nation were not his only neighbours. The Cyan Nation and the Blue Nation had also established cities in the area. This was perfect, as his plan involved connecting them through a means that would unite all of bear kind: trading honey. To bears, trading honey is much like trading Pokemon cards. That is, if every single Pokemon card looked and tasted exactly the same. Without further ado, an even greater honeypot fleet was gathered, and they set out to trade with all three nations. First, the Cyan Nation, who accepted the terms with great joy. Then, the Green Nation, who held the same enthusiasm, although this could have been out of fear as the giant salmon was currently having a bath in the waters next door. Finally, the Blue Nation agreed, and not a moment too soon, as the salmon had finished its dip in the sea and was now laying waste to one of the green cities. The shipments of honey began at once, and whilst the air raid sirens sounded in the city of, Wold? Vast amounts of honey was being transported right under the salmon's nose. With trading relationships beginning to grow, the Blue Nation agreed to become part of Barnaby Bear's future empire. But, in Wold, buildings had started to crumble, and there was no time to waste. The honey delivery service ramped up production once more, and the Cyan Nation too agreed to unify themselves under Barnaby's beautiful brown banner. It turns out, buying out the Cyan Nation had proved to be a major success. They were a very technologically savvy nation, who had discovered the secrets to aviation as well as seafaring, meaning the honeypots would now be able to conquer the sky and ocean. Barnaby's ships were designed with a huge stack of gold bars on top, to show off the bears' vast wealth, and Barnaby's planes were given a huge bag of money on top, to show off the bears' vast wealth. Barnaby might have been going a bit mad with power at this point, but it was fine. All that was left in Operation Bear Brotherhood was for the bears to acquire some weaponry. By this point, the city of Wold had been renamed to Salmon's Breach because the salmon was currently breaching it. Thankfully, the appearance of a new bear nation, the Pink Nation, held all the answers. The Pink Nation were a very aggressive species of bear, and as such, they had invented all sorts of guns. Having now converted every honey geyser on the mainland, trading with the Pink Nation was pretty easy work, and before long, they were on side. The honeypot planes were then upgraded by strapping two massive cannons to each side. and that meant it was now finally time to take the giant salmon down for good. As it thumped and stomped around, the giant salmon was as intimidating as ever. But before it could devour any more buildings, the city of Salmon's Breach was given hope by the distant rumble of honey-fueled engines. The Bear Armada were here, and they meant business. They began to spray vast amounts of honey down from above, and the salmon was so sticky that it was unable to maneuver into a fire-breathing position. The honeypots circled around it in a dizzying formation, and, however giant this salmon may be, it could not handle the collective might of the Bear Brotherhood. With a great boom that echoed across the land, the salmon fell, and the day was saved. With the giant salmon out of the way, Barnaby and the Bear Brotherhood could begin to prosper, and they traded all the honey they could to their heart's content. They developed new ways to amass unbelievable riches, such as bulk shipping and aggressive advertisement. They flew blimps with TV screens all around neighbouring cities, singing the praises of their great leader, Barnaby the Salmon Killer Bear. But when all was said and done, Barnaby felt a kind of emptiness. He felt he was in need of a new adventure. So he left his fortune in the hands of his daughter Beatrice and flew away in his honeypot helicopter to a far and distant land. And as he went, he gave his people one last message. My name is Barnaby, and I have all the honey in the world. Now I go in search of some toast to spread it on.